So let me ask you a question. Would it be all right with you if God multiplied your resources? Would that be all right? So, two principles of multiplication, all right? They're real simple. Here's number one. It has to be blessed before it can multiply. It has to be blessed before it can multiply. And we've learned from this series the way our finances are blessed, we've seen this over and over again, is we bring the first 10% to the house of God. Even Hebrews backs it up, New Testament, that Jesus himself receives and blesses our finances. So you have to give the first. See, I know some people who give a little here and give a little there, but they don't bring the first 10% to the house of God. Listen to me, their finances are not blessed and they will never multiply because only Jesus can bless them. Think about this. What if the disciples had given out the 2 fish and the 5 loaves before Jesus blessed it? I'm going to say that again because that's extremely important. What if they had just started giving it away and Jesus had not blessed it? Would it ever have multiplied? No. It's a blessing. It's the same way when you give a little here and a little there, but you don't bring the first 10% to the house of God. It does not have the blessing of Jesus on it. There's a couple in our church that when I shared this series one time, they had been giving 10%, but they'd been giving 5% to Gateway and 5% to a missions organization. And when I shared about the tithe, we do believe in giving to missions organizations, but that's over and above the tithe. The tithe comes to the local church where you are. And so they said, we had the check written, we tore it up, and made the check out for the full 10% to the church. And here's what they said. That was on a Sunday. On a Monday, we had been waiting for a bonus that we were supposed to receive, been told we would receive it. We'd been waiting for months for this bonus. And on Monday, it was in the mail, and they wrote a letter that said, we feel so badly that this took so long for you to get this that we actually added some to it. And the amount that they added was the exact amount that they added the day before on their check. You will never convince me that was a coincidence. It's God saying, do it my way. So it has to be blessed before it can multiply. Here's principle number 2. It has to be given away before it can multiply. It has to be given away before it can multiply. So the first principle refers to tithing, bringing the first 10% to the local church, and Jesus blesses it. But once he's blessed it, now you can give over and above. You can give an extra offering or two, for in our case, we call it Heart for the Kingdom. You can give offerings over and above to missions organizations, to things like this, okay? But it has to be given away. Think about this. What if the disciples, after Jesus had blessed it, what if the disciples had eaten it? It never would have multiplied. 2 fish, 5 rolls. What if Jesus blessed it and then they just ate it? It never would have multiplied. There are a lot of people who will tithe, but they don't give anything above. And here's the sad thing. It has the potential to multiply, but they just keep eating it. Okay, so let me tell you how this worked out in my own life and in Debbie's life. I got saved 9 months after Debbie and I were married. And a few months later, I heard my first message on tithing, and immediately we tithed. And God began to bless us. I went to Bible college, and then I was a traveling evangelist. So I did not work at any church. I didn't receive any salary from a church at that time. I only received offerings or honorariums when I would travel and speak. And so I'm doing that for a living, and the Lord spoke to me one day in my quiet time, and he said, I want you to get your finances in order so I can bless them. Now, I want you to think about that. That's a very important impression that I received from the Lord. I want you to get your finances in order so I can bless them. God cannot bless things out of order. And we have a stewardship department that can help you get your finances in order. So I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do? Back then, I didn't know what to do. And he told me 3 things. So I'm going to tell you the 3 things he told me. He said, number 1, get out of debt. Now, this means different things to different people. Different people have different convictions, okay? For us, we could still have a mortgage, but we were not to borrow for depreciating items, only appreciating items, like a mortgage on a home. So we have a mortgage to this day, and we have had a mortgage but we put it on a 15-year note. We do our best to pay it off each, okay? So I just wanted you to know, because when I say that, I want you to let the Lord apply it to you how he applies it to you, okay? So, number one, he said, get out of debt. So for us, the first thing that we need to do, we had this car that was too big for us. The payment was too big. And so we sold that car and we bought a car for cash, $750. That was all we could afford. So we bought a car for $750. But you got to hear me. We actually loved that car. I mean, we loved it because we were getting our finances in order. We loved that car. We prayed over it. We anointed it with oil about a quart a week. And we drove that car. Okay, second thing the Lord said to me was don't manipulate. Don't manipulate. Now, I was in ministry, but a whole bunch of people manipulate for money. And God never blesses manipulation. Manipulation comes from a root word that means witchcraft. So you cannot manipulate. You can't drop hints and expect God to provide for you. And so for me, I said, well, Lord, how does that work out? He said, well, when someone asks you to come speak, they say, what are your financial requirements for coming? And you say, pay our expenses and give us an offering. And some of my friends would actually say, pay our expenses, give us an offering, and the offering has to be a minimum of. I never even said that. I just said, whatever, just pay our expenses and give us an offering. Here's what the Lord said to me. He said, from now on, you say, I have no financial requirements for coming. By the way, this was about 30 years ago, and I still do that to this day. I have no financial requirements coming. And the Lord said to me, I want to teach you who your provider is. That it's not how you arrange things, it's me. Now, again, other people, you can do things differently. Don't put this on you. Let the Lord speak to you what he wants you. So this guy calls me. I will never forget. First guy calls and says, Robert, can you come and speak? I said, yes. We worked out a date. He said, what are your financial requirements for coming? I said, I have no financial requirements for coming. And I remember he said, well, that's good because I don't even think we can pay your gas. Now, he didn't say pay your expenses. He said pay your gas. Let me tell you why that's important. We get in that $750 car. We start driving. It was to Oklahoma. We start driving to Oklahoma. I stopped to fill the car up with gas. I went in to pay for it, and the lady said to me, it's taken care of. I said, what do you mean it's taken care of? She said, because when you pulled in, God told me that I was to fill your car up with gas. And I went out and I got in the car and I said, Lord, I sure like doing it better your way than my way. And here's the third thing the Lord said to me, give. So he said, get out of debt, don't manipulate, give. Now, I have to tell you what happened. I said to the Lord, I do give, I tithe. Now, please don't get offended by this. This is just the impression that I got in my spirit when I said that. I said, Lord, I do give, I tithe. I felt like the Lord went, I mean, that really, I kind of felt like it was like, idiot. You know, I mean, that's what I felt. And I'm like, what do you mean, Lord? I do. I give 10%. He said, you don't give 10%. You return 10%. He said, the 10% is mine. And when you read the language in the Bible, if you don't return it, then you've stolen it. That's the language. I can show it to you in Joshua and in Malachi. Robbed and stolen. Those are the two words God uses. He used that. So I said, well, Lord, what do you mean give? He said, I mean give over and above the tithe. That's when you give. And I asked him three very important questions. I said, well, Lord, how will I know when to give? How will I know where to give? And how will I know how much to give? Aren't those important questions? Listen to his very simple answer. Here's what he said. I'll tell you. My people hear my voice. My sheep hear my voice. And so I said, okay, Lord. So not long after that, I go to speak at a church. Now, you have to remember, the only salary that Debbie and I received was when I would go speak in a church and if they would give us an offering. And I said, you don't have to give us anything. So I go to speak for this church, and it's the only speaking engagement I have for the whole month. I only have one engagement that whole month, all right? And it's at a church with about 60 people in attendance. And I go and I speak at that church, and I said, I have no requirements coming. The pastor gets up afterwards. He tells the whole church that. He said, he has no financial requirements coming. I want us to give an offering, and I want us to give a good offering. So they count it, and then they bring a check to the pastor, and we're standing like right here at the front, and the pastor brings me this check, and he says, look at this. Look at this. He said, we've never given this much. And he was so excited to be able to do that. And I looked down at the amount, and the amount was the exact amount of our monthly budget. Exactly. And while I'm looking at that check and thinking how faithful God is, I kind of glance up and I look over the shoulder of this pastor that's talking to me, and I see at the back of the church a missionary that had just spoken right before I spoke, shared a report, and this voice said to me, give him the offering. And I remember exactly what I thought. I rebuke you, Satan. That's not God. That's not God. Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. That is not God. I remember, this, it's funny, I know, but I remember even saying, that's not you. That's not you. I know you, that's not you. You would not do that, God. And then I remember the Lord said to me, I told you that I would tell you when to give and where to give and how much to give. And I'm telling you to give right now to that missionary the whole amount. And so the sanctuary was clearing out by now, and I endorsed the check when no one was looking, folded it in half, and I went to the missionary and said, I'm going to give you something, but don't look at it until after you leave, because it was a very large amount. And I said, don't ever tell anyone I did this, because I didn't want to manipulate in any way. I believe now I'm supposed to share these testimonies to help other people, but back then I didn't share any of these things that I was doing. So I gave him this offering, and he said thank you. And then Debbie and I walked outside, and there were some couples standing in the parking lot. And one of the couples said, hey, we're going to go get some pizza. Do y'all want to go? And we said, yeah, because we were broke, And so, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, sure. We love going to eat pizza. So we go eat pizza with them, and there are 6 couples total. So Debbie and I and 5 other couples. The 6 guys sat on, if you see this in your mind, sat on one end of the table. The 6 girls sat on the other end of the table. Debbie's all the way at the end, on that end. I'm at this end, all right? And then this guy across from me that I had met one time before, just once, I just met him one time, he just leans across the table like this, and he said to me, how much was the love offering? Just like that. And again, because I'm a numbers person, I knew exactly what it was, and so I told him the number. And remember, it was an offering, not an honorarium. An honorarium was zeros. It's a round amount, like $250 or $500 or something like that. This was an offering that had, dollars and cents on it. So I told him how much it was. And then this guy says to me, where's the check? Like that. And I know you're supposed to tell the truth, but I got kind of flustered. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know why this guy was questioning me. And so I just heard myself say, Debbie has it. And so he says to me, go get it. I want to see it. So I said, okay. So I get up and I walk down where Debbie is, and I lean down to her and I said, how's your pizza? Is it good? Okay, good. There's nothing else to say. There's no check. And so I go back, and again, I know you're supposed to tell the truth, but I don't know, why is this guy asking me this? Why is he questioning me? And I didn't want to say, in my heart, I didn't want to brag. I didn't want to say, we gave it to a missionary, and it's the only meeting we have this month. And I didn't want to say that. And so I just heard myself again. I said, it's in the car. And he said, it's not in the car. So I said, where is it? I mean, you know so much, pal. I started getting frustrated. Why is this guy grilling me like this? What's going on here? And this guy said to me, who, by the way, is now a member of our church and has verified this testimony. This guy said to me, you gave it away, didn't you? I said, yes. I said, how do you know that? I'd only met him one time before. I said, how do you know that? He said, because God told me. And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a check that he had written before he came to the service that night. And I found out later, which I didn't even know, he didn't even attend that church. He just heard I was speaking, and God told him, go give him this check. So he writes a check out before he comes. He holds this check out that's made out to our ministry, and he holds it up like this. Now listen to me, before God in heaven, and this man has verified this, it was exactly 10 times the amount of the check that I'd just gotten right, down to the penny. Exactly. He said, here. And he's holding the top of it, and I reached out and I took the bottom of it, but he wouldn't let it go. And I realized he wants to tell me something. He wants to say something. I now know he wanted to impart something. You do know there's a gift of giving in the body of Christ. There's a gift of giving. That's a spiritual gift. So I'm holding the bottom. He's holding the top. He looked right across the top of the check, right into my eyes, and he said, God's about to teach you about giving so you can teach the body of Christ. And he let the check go. Here's what came into my mind when he let that check go. Here's what I thought. This is God's money. This is not my money. This is God's money. All of it from now on is God's money. By God's grace, I have had that thought with every check that I've received since then. And we've been very blessed financially because for some reason people buy the books that I write, and so we've been very, very blessed. I still don't know why, but we've been very blessed. We've been able to give a whole lot to the kingdom of God. But I thought, this is God's money. Do you know the first thing we did? We bought a single mother car, and we still had the $750 car. We started paying people salaries that were out of work. We started giving 70% of our income to the Lord. We just started giving, and we never told anyone, and money started coming in from everywhere, and we just kept funneling it through to people. I remember a few years later, we had a van that we traveled in as a green van, and I remember the Lord told me to sell it. And we traveled all the time at that time. My son, who's my oldest son, Josh, some of you know him, when he was 3 years old, we were somewhere speaking, and someone actually said to him, where do you live? He said, in the van. So the Lord told me to sell the van for $12,000. I sold it. We went to the mission field right after that, and this missionary drove this old rickety van, and I said, why don't you get you a new van? He said, I'm about to. He said, God showed me last week a van that we're going to buy. I said, how much is it? Anyone want to take a guess? $12,000. And we bought that van. We've been living this way for years, giving and giving and giving extravagantly. And it's verified. The elders of the church know it. Steve knows it. Steve is telling me I'm one of the highest givers in the church. That's not because of my salary. It's because of the outside income that the Lord's blessed me with. And I'm grateful for that. But let me wrap this up. Let me tell you what happened. A few years after this, I was having my quiet time, and the Lord just spoke to me one day. I was reading in Philippians about Jesus gave up everything. And the Lord said to me, would you give me everything? And when he said it, I knew what he meant. He meant everything in my personal checking account, everything in our, Debbie and mine, everything in our personal savings, everything in our ministry account, and everything in our ministry savings, which would be like a business account. That was where our income came from. Everything in our retirement. At that time, we had 2 cars, both cars, and our house. And the way we did that, by the way, because we gave it to a pastor that had 5 children, and the church said the best way for you to do it would be for the church to buy the house as a parsonage, and then you give the proceeds back to the church. And so that was what we did. And there's the man who did that, who oversaw that transaction, is also a member of our church now, and can verify that we gave that to the church. So, and that was not Gateway, that was the church I was a member of a long time ago. So, anyway, we gave everything away. So the next morning, I'm thinking about it, and because I'm a math person, I'm adding it up in my mind. All these accounts, you know, the cars, the house, I'm adding it up, and the Lord said to me, what are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, no, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't want to tell you what I'm doing. And you know, if you're thinking something, but you don't tell him what you're thinking, he doesn't know. Yeah, he knows, just so you know, he knows. So I said, well, Lord, I said, I'm not having a real spiritual thought right now, so I don't want to tell you. He said, tell me what you're thinking. I said, well, you know that old saying, you can't outgive God? He said, yeah, I've heard that. I said, well, I said, I don't mean this wrong, but I think And when you add up everything that I gave, I said, this time I think I've got you. I have no reason why I said that word. I said, I think I've got you, like that. And the Lord said to me, you think you've got me? And when he said that, the phone rang. And I picked up the phone. By the way, the man on the other end of the phone is a member of our church now and has verified this story also. I picked up the phone and I said, hello? And this guy said, Robert, God told me to help you with your transportation. And I thought, he's going to buy us a car. But even if he buys us a car, we just gave away both cars. By the way, at that time, we'd given away 9 cars. We've given away a lot more cars since then. And by the way, let me just brag on the Lord through you. Last year, you, Gateway Church, gave over 100 cars to people. So it's contagious, the spirit of giving. And so, anyway, I was like, well, even if you buy us a car, Lord, I still got you, because gave away all our retirement and house, and I still got you. But thank you for the car, you know. And so I said, well, what did the Lord tell you to do? That's what the guy said. He told me to buy you an airplane. And he said, I'm going to pay for the maintenance and the hangar and the insurance and the fuel, and I've hired a pilot, and I'm going to pay his salary. Here's his name and number, and you just call him and tell him where you want to go and when you want to go. And the Lord said to me, got you. Got you. Now listen to me. This is not a message, give and you get an airplane, okay? By the way, I want to clarify, he gave the use of the airplane to us, and we gave the use of it back to him about a year later. And we don't have an airplane today. I don't own an airplane. The church doesn't own an airplane. So this is not about an airplane, because that is not the best part of the testimony. Here's the best part of the testimony. A while after that, I was reading the most famous story about Solomon, and you know this story. What's the most famous story about Solomon? The most famous. famous story about Solomon is that God said to Solomon, ask anything you want, and I'll give it to you. Can you imagine God saying that to you? Can you imagine that? So I'm reading that, and I thought it said at night, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream and said, ask anything you want. So I thought, and the Lord leads us when we're reading the Bible, I thought, I wonder what happened that day. What happened that day was he was inaugurated the king of Israel, and it was tradition for the king to sacrifice one bull when he was inaugurated. Do you know how many Solomon sacrificed? 1,000 bulls. 1,000. That's pretty extravagant. And I remember the Lord said to me that day, I only say to extravagant givers, ask anything you want. He said, I would never say that to a selfish person because I couldn't trust them. But I can trust givers. Now, I'm not even thinking about that Debbie and I had given away everything we had. But right then, when the Lord said that to me, he said to me, ask. Ask anything you want. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I've been very honest with you, and you know this. I have an immoral past. I was immoral after Debbie and I were married. And I thought when she finds out, it's going to end our marriage. So I knew exactly what I wanted. I said, God, I want for Debbie and I to be passionately in love for the rest of our lives. And this May, we celebrate